Lisa Renato is the Executive Officer of Lifeline Loddon Mallee, and she's my guest today on Remarkable Regional Business. And wow, this episode, can I say right now, Lisa can talk. She is an expert talker, but it is actually full-on gold. We talk about what it takes to run a successful for-impact organisation in a regional area, one that is very heavily dependent on funding from donations and their own commercial activities, and how she's been able to grow and develop the capability of that arm and that sector of the overall organisation that is Lifeline. So, wow, strap in. It's going to be a good one. Take it away. Lisa Renato from Lifeline Loddon Mallee, my great friend. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me. I don't know just from Lifeline. Like, you sent me some questions and I was like, you do that thing where you say, people say, who are, I'm Lisa, I'm from Lifeline, and that's true.
Yeah.
But how many times do we hear like that? I mean, that's very I'm very passionate about Lifeline, but it's not all, not all of who.
No, not at all. And we are going to dive into the details. Don't you worry. Some of my favorite conversations are people's backstories and how they've been built and formed into the leader and the person they are today. So strap in.
Hold on, roller coaster coming.
We're going deep. But we're going to start with the simple and easy ones. Well, I suppose I should say I did call you my great friend because we've known each other for a little while, right? And we've been through some journeys together. So we might even touch on a little bit of that side story. But I want to start with Lifeline. This is what you're doing right now, and it's what you're rocking at. I want to hear about Lifeline. For those who don't know, probably have heard of Lifeline, but give us some details. What does the organisation look like, and what does it do?
Yeah, and that's the thing. People go, Lifeline. Oh, I love Lifeline. They do great things. At the end of every news broadcast, 13, 11, 14. If you're feeling distressed or you're in crisis, absolutely true.
Yeah.
But I still meet people in town who are like, "Oh, you work for Lifeline, Lisa, like National Lifeline?" And I'm like, "Yeah, no, like Lifeline Loddon Mallee."
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, what do you mean?" I'm like, "Well, we answer the calls at our call centre in Bendigo and our call centre in Mildura." And they're like the 13, 11, 14 calls. And I'm like, "Yeah."
Wow.
Like, is that new? And I'm like, 30 years.
Wow, right.
So that's it. Like, that's, what we're doing is we're building awareness. I'm getting less and less of those, I didn't know there was a Lifeline here.
Right.
But I guess, like Lifeline Loddon Mallee, which is who I'm working for, and lovely to hear you say I'm rocking it. Well, I'm a little bit more old school like that. I'm, feel like I'm kicking some goals. But we're one of 41 Lifeline centres around Australia. So Lifeline is like a national network that delivers crisis support. And as I said, everyone knows 13, 11, 14. And here in the Loddon Mallee region, we've got the two call centres. So Bendigo and Mildura, we have almost 100 volunteers who deliver primarily crisis support via that hotline service 24/7. But we do a lot of community programs too. So we have a whole team of accredited trainers who deliver like mental health first aid and domestic family violence awareness, suicide and intervention skills.
Right.
Then we have like a clinical team who delivers like in-person or telehealth counselling services or external supervision for other professionals who need to be supported in the work that they're doing.
Wow.
We do a lot of critical incident responses. So when there's an incident in community and they need that additional support, we go out and try and support that. We just got some more funding to deliver that on a larger scale, which is really exciting.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's not just like people sitting by the phone just going ready to answer a call and help the other person on the end of the line. It's not that simple.
No. So it is, that's absolutely at the core, and that's the most important thing we do and will always be the most important thing we do. But these other things add to our suicide prevention.
Yeah.
By building resilience in the community, giving other people skills to support people until they can get their help they need.
Yeah.
Recognising the signs or symptoms of various mental health distress or crisis, and being able to refer people and hold space with them until they can get in front of a professional. And that all goes towards working towards that Suicide-Free Australia, which is what our vision is all about. So, I guess at the heart of it, we're saving lives.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get the privilege to hear some of what we're doing out in the community. Sometimes people randomly call me and say, oh my God, I just had to call you. My friend was really not well. They didn't tell us. And they reached their peak and they reached out to Lifeline, and thank God.
Wow.
And so that is that thing that gives you that goosebumps right up the cheek, and fills me with such a sense of pride. And I'm not even the one answering the call. We've got amazing volunteers who are trained to do that, and they do such an amazing job. I can't even describe. Caleb, being a close friend, that I'm a talker.
Yeah.
Not so working on the active listening. But to be a volunteer, you've got to have super amazing self-awareness, amazing compassion, really good active listening skills. So it is really, people say, my cup fills and overflows when I hear things like that. But we don't get to hear that. We don't know that all the time, because obviously it's a confidential anonymous service. So it's only when people come back to share with us that we hear about that. But we know the work that we're doing, the data tells us the work we're doing is saving lives. Yeah,
and some of that data, you might not have specifics off the top of your head, but please paint the picture of what the scale of this problem is, and this issue that you are tackling, this suicide and crisis amongst Australians. What are we talking about?
Yeah, here? So I can give you. I am pretty well versed in the high level numbers.
Yeah. So
this year, Lifeline Australia nationally will answer about 1.3 million calls from Australians seeking crisis support.
Wow.
Are some of those what we call imminent suicide? Absolutely. So people who have taken steps or have got a plan to take their own life. About 2% of all calls we receive are at that level.
Wow.
And the rest of the calls are made up of a whole range, depending on what's happening in the community, in the world, globally, economically. Cost of living crisis is a current big one that then trickles down to financial pressures, mortgage stress, relationship stresses, all these kinds of things. But we are seeing a lot more people reach out long before they get to that imminent suicide. And so we do talk to a lot of people who are feeling lonely or isolated, might be experiencing anxiety or overwhelm, might need to have a safe, non-judgmental space just to work through something.
Yeah, wow.
Might need that connection. And in our region, between our two call centres, we answered 22,000 of those calls last year.
Whoa. That's a lot of conversations.
It's a lot of conversations.
And at what, is that, obviously you could call that number anytime, day or night. Yep. So how do you operate in a way that fulfills that supply and demand of being available and ready? Yeah, well, the good thing about being a national network is we operate nationally. So there might not be someone always filling every seat at our call centre 24/7. Yep. But there are it's scheduled so that we make sure that we've got enough people on across Australia so that you're answered by the next available crisis supporter. Yep. Now, some people say, well, how does that benefit my community? I'll come back to that in a minute. But of course, the most important thing is that we can support people when they need it the most. And the people who are calling from our region are getting their call answered as quickly as possible. Not when someone's available in their region. That's the most important thing, right? And in smaller regional and rural communities, people actually have a sense of comfort knowing that it's going to remain anonymously confidential, because we don't ask for any disclosing information unless it's offered, and it still remains confidential even after that. And people have a sense of comfort knowing they're not going to ring and accidentally speak to Lisa from Bendigo, who they happen to know, or they recognise. I know people will be shocked about this, my voice. So
It's part of a national network. So we're not just answering calls from our region, but we're making sure calls from our region are being answered as quickly as possible.
Yep.
And the biggest benefit of having a call centre in our towns like Bendigo and Mildura, only opened 18 months ago, is the skills and knowledge that people learn to become a crisis support volunteer that they then take back out into the community.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. So people say things to me like, still, I've got some volunteers who've been with us for 5 years, 10 years, 25 years.
What?
Yeah. And they say to me, I still feel like I get so much more out of it than I give.
Wow, that's pretty big.
They say things like, particularly we do have probably 50% of our cohort are people who are retired or semi-retired. They say things like, I now know how to have a conversation with my grandchildren that I never would have even attempted before.
Whoa.
People say, I could see the signs of someone at my workplace struggling and I knew how to have that uncomfortable conversation.
Wow.
So, that they then take that out. And, it's that old, I did say I was old school before. It's that old school ripple effect because it is so true.
Yeah.
For every volunteer we train, they then go out and use those skills in the community. And that is absolutely the biggest benefit of having a call centre in our region.
It's pretty rocking. Like those skills they're just human, necessary, powerful skills that not a lot of people would get trained in necessarily. It's not something you learn at school really, and that's a bit of a bugbear of mine. Like the things that I never learned at school, and I don't know that they're taught any at the moment either, is like financial wisdom,
yes,
communication and relationship skills.
Yep.
It's like they're kind of essential life skills, and if you're not involved or in a world like Lifeline, then you may not encounter actual training unless you seek it out yourself, right?
Yeah, that's right. And, I've got a couple of stories about volunteers, like one of our longest serving volunteers. I didn't even know until recently what they did when they were working.
Yeah.
Turns out they used to be a train driver. So
wow.
absolutely probably came in with no skills in crisis support. Most people don't. And then they build on those.
Wow.
Another one of our crisis support has been around for a long time. And when they told their family that they were going to volunteer at Lifeline, they were like, really? You? You're going to talk to people who are experiencing crisis? That's shocking. And, of course, they're amazing at it.
Of course.
And their family are like, oh, my God, that's amazing, because I always found that I had difficulty having conversations and, and then that ripple effect within their family is pretty amazing. So it's really – and even that's like really cup filling, and we've got some really committed – all of our volunteers are committed, but we've got some people who really go, above and beyond, and that's kind of hard to deny. And kind of hard, like people say, oh, you're rocking it, you're kicking goals, but not like these people, they're doing it purely from the goodness of their heart. So.
Yeah, well, that's a real blessing to a leader to have some really amazing people, right? That's a massive part of the puzzle. You can't have a rockin' legendary leader and have unmotivated, dispassionate staff members and still achieve great things. It takes the whole team, right?
Yeah.
But paint the picture of the scale of your volunteer base, right?
Yeah,
so
sure.
How many have you got in different areas?
So I guess to go back a couple of things, you were asking about the data before. So I think other really important things for people to know, like about the scale of the suicide prevention space is, in 2022, which is the most recent figures we have, 3,249 people died by suicide in Australia. It's almost double the road toll, so it's a significant number.
Wow.
And people don't realise that. The largest cohort of deaths by suicide are male. 75% of all deaths by suicide are men. So we're all doing a lot of work to reach out to those, because that can sometimes be a bit of a harder nut to crack. And 15 to 44-year-olds are the largest age group to die by suicide. But in Victoria, we are starting to see a rise in men over 65 as well.
Wow.
So there's some really interesting some really interesting facts and information, because it really tells us where we need to be putting our focus in those community-led projects.
Yeah.
But in regards to the volunteers that we have locally here in Loddon Mallee, so here in Bendigo, our call centre's got about 74 for active volunteers who are regularly on the phone, so doing a shift at least once a week.
Wow.
We have volunteers who do shifts 2 or 3 times a week. It's pretty amazing.
Wow. And how long's the shift?
So shift, look, we try and encourage people to do a 3-hour shift, but some people will do multiple 2-hour shifts.
Yep.
Some people will do a 5-hour shift once a fortnight. We do try and make it as flexible as we can.
Yeah, nice.
And so the bulk of the calls are here because we have a 6-seat call centre here in the heart of Bendigo.
Yep.
And then about 18 months ago, we opened up a call centre in Mildura. And that was through a shared partnership with a local organisation, Disability Employment Agency up there, the Christie Centre. And so that operates on restricted time. So it's evenings and weekends only.
Yep.
But we have 15 volunteers up there answering calls already as well.
Wow.
So, in addition to that, we've got a volunteer board of directors. So they're giving their time, telling us what the strategy should be for the organisation, giving us a strategic direction, overseeing our governance and financial literacy, which is, we're very lucky. We've got a very strong, well-rounded, experienced board.
Nice.
And we cover a population of about 420,000 people in our region. So I think that equates to about 1.6% of the total Australian population live within the Loddon Mallee region.
1.6. Nice. And so Loddon Mallee, for those who, what does that comprise of LGAs in the area?
Great idea. So if you're not from Victoria, we start in a town called Gisborne, which is about 40 minutes north of Melbourne, and all the way up to the border of Victoria, New South Wales and South Australia in Mildura. And for those that perhaps are Victorian and know, so our major towns are Gisborne, Bendigo, Swan Hill, Sea Lake, Robinvale, Mildura, and then some real remote regional towns as well.
Yeah, I know a bunch of little towns in through there. It's a massive area.
It is a really big area, and my other Victorian counterparts are covering areas just as large. Gippsland pretty much covers the whole of the eastern part of the state.
Whoa.
Albury-Wodonga covers sort of borders right into where we are, but covers a massive area within New South Wales as well.
Wow.
Geelong, southwest Victoria, Ballarat. Yeah, so we do cover fairly massive geographies, although there are a couple of geographies in New South Wales that are quite a lot larger than us. So maybe I shouldn't complain.
True.
I was meeting with a fellow CEO. We get together every now and again to share ideas and collaborate on things. And someone was telling me their geography, and I went back and Googled the map, and I was like, okay, maybe 6 hours from one end to the other end in Loddon Mallee isn't that far. I'm like, how far would it take you to drive from the furthest spot to the furthest spot? And they're like, about 8-9 hours. And I'm like, oh my goodness.
That's intense.
So they're huge geographies for us to ensure that we're servicing. And that often means multiple call centres and multiple community projects. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. So that's a bit of the scale in terms of the people. That's a fair amount of people, right? And I'm really interested. One of the first not-for-profits that we've had on here, right? So I'm keen to dig into the inner workings of how you're able to manage that team, but specifically you're in a unique situation where they're all volunteers, right? So how have you seen a shift in volunteerism? Because that is something that I've heard has been a really big challenge over the last 5 years, say, a massive shift in that culture. So unpack a little bit of that. What is it like leading a team of volunteers and being really active and connected with them? But then what have you seen in terms of volunteerism?
Yeah, so I think the big thing is, I used to do commercial business where it was all about, what's the average yield you're going to get on a room, or how many billable hours can we get, that kind of thing. So it was a huge shift for me to go from commercial business to not-for-profit business, where it's just a completely different beast, I suppose. And I made that decision very specifically. And it was a very clear, determined decision, which I'll talk a bit about later. But as far as volunteerism, I sort of came in the middle of COVID. So we're classed as an essential service during COVID and all that was happening. And so we saw a lot of volunteers stepping up to do more, because my assumption is that we were one of the reasons people were allowed to leave their home.
Yes.
But then, of course, the offset of that was we started to see a lot of volunteer burnout when things all open back up and we could all continue to, do as we were doing. So that then meant that we started to see some significant attrition. People realised that they wanted to be able to go on holiday because they hadn't been able to do that, or wanted to be able to move, can spend more time with their grandchildren or their children. So, and that's all part of the volunteer landscape. So, definitely getting volunteers is harder, and we certainly, how we've managed that, I guess, is, one, the way I lead, and two, how I encourage my team to lead. So getting volunteers is really hard. So we've got to work really hard and show them the benefits. So talking about things like what you're going to get out of it, far beyond the fact that we need you to commit to doing the training, which is very detailed and full on.
Yeah.
And we want you to give 3 hours of your time every week, which is a huge commitment, and we're so grateful. But we need to show them more than that, understanding what they're going to benefit from it. So we've made a shift in how we recruit our volunteers, and we've kind of cast our net a bit wider. We've gone back to some really old school stuff like advertising in the classifieds in the paper, which hadn't been done for a while.
Yeah.
Really trying to engage with local media on radio and newspaper to get them to talk about what we're doing and why you'd want to volunteer with Lifeline. Obviously, things like social media has been a big one as well. So really trying to broaden our reach in that regard.
What have you seen working in that space of recruitment?
Look, it's different every time. So we usually run 2 to 3 groups of training a year, and it just seems to be dependent on who's looking for an opportunity to volunteer at the time. Sometimes it's social media. Other times it's lots of calls coming through from the classified ads. Sometimes it's word of mouth. It really, there is no one silver bullet, as they say.
Yeah.
So trying a nice mix of media has worked better for us.
Yep.
And putting the focus on what the volunteer is going to get out of it, not just what they've got to give into it, seems to be makes the opportunity more attractive for people.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. But I'm keen to hear, how do you propose that? What do you say to what does a volunteer get out of it?
Well, so I guess for starters is lots of people are really keen to build their learning. So they get access to a nationally accredited course that really isn't delivered by any other organisation.
Yeah, cool.
And they get to get provided social connection with other people in their community that might not have ever had that with.
Yeah, that's good.
And then they get to feel like they're doing good work within the community on an ongoing basis. But because of the type of work crisis supporters do particularly, but also we've got our thrift store where we have volunteers as well, is we provide a lot of professional development opportunities. Now, not everyone's interested in that, but people who are, come along and can learn about a whole range of topics that may or may not be related to crisis support. So I think the connection and the opportunity to get that social interaction and that learning is a big piece of it. But I also think knowing what you're going to be doing for the community and how you're going to be helping people. And, that's a really big part of it as well.
It's pretty deep. Like you're saying to people, we're going to help equip you to help someone in potentially one of their darkest hours. That's full on.
That's right. And it's a huge undertaking. And I think the biggest thing we teach people is that you don't need to fix the problem.
Good one.
We have a really clear framework that people have to work through when they're on a call, regardless of whether it's someone who might be elderly and lonely or, perhaps a really overwhelmed working mum or someone who's, really in their darkest hour. And the absolute first thing we do is provide connection, get some sort of connection with them.
Yeah, nice.
And connect them to something outside of what they're in.
Yep.
Because we all know when we're in the inertia of a crisis that things only seem darker.
Yeah, really narrow.
And then we go through a process where we attend to whatever their really accurate need is at the moment. Yep. What is it that you need now from me? What is it that you're looking for from this contact? Why have you reached out?
Yep.
And then we start to work towards affirming the connections they've got outside. What sort of things might they do when they hang up that call to continue on?
Yeah.
When might they contact us back if they need to? And then we really try and allow them to come to their own decision about how they're going to be empowered to do that. So, lots of people shy away from volunteering with Lifeline because it is deep, dark and scary. And there are days where it is really, really tough. But we hold an amazing amount of support for our volunteers. They're never alone on a call. There's always someone available to them to support them who's got that clinical experience.
Yeah, cool.
We have a clinical team within the organisation here that are on the ground and are available for anyone who needs to have support either immediately or following on from a call or a shift.
Yeah, wow.
And there's a whole bunch of parameters in around that. So the most courageous part about the whole thing is taking the first step and saying, I want to make a difference.
Yeah.
And so we do see people who are ready to do that. And it depends on what's happening in their life. We do have a lot of people who say they lost someone to suicide in the past.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily encourage people to do that when they're still really recently bereaved because that's not helpful to them. But we do have people who as time's gone on, they want to be able to try and help somebody.
Yeah.
And the other thing we're seeing in volunteerism is certainly for our organisation, we've kind of shifted gears. So we've cast a wider net with our volunteering recruiting, but we're putting a lot more effort into engaging the volunteers that we have, because when you've got 100 volunteers, and we're a small Lifeline centre compared to some have 500 volunteers.
Wow.
So trying to engage those people and your idea of engagement and my idea of engagement are two very different things.
Yes.
So offering a range of ways to engage and connect with the centre and the work that we're doing outside of answering calls is really important. Now, some people want to come in, they want to provide their crisis support shift, and they want to go home, and that's it. They don't, that's perfect for them. Other people want to access professional development. Other people want to come out to the monthly dinners. Other people want to be involved in what's happening in our fundraising space. So really focusing on what opportunities we can provide them to offer more to their volunteering experience has really helped us increase our retention of volunteers. So, I would have said when I joined the organisation 4 years ago, our focus was 70% recruitment, 30% retention. I would say we've flipped that.
Yeah, wow.
So, it's like and we treat our volunteers like professional staff. There is no difference between them and us.
Yeah.
They have the same amount of respect and responsibility, and that's how we create a really inclusive, positive culture throughout all levels of our organisation. And I believe that also helps us achieve the high levels of retention because it's a place people want to come.
It's I think there's a lot of things that can be learnt from a volunteer-led organisation or an organisation that's got their working base is volunteers in the corporate world, because it's same that it's going to cost less to retain. It's going to be far more efficient and effective. You're going to have more highly skilled staff or workers.
That's right.
If you retain them longer. And so what cast or juxtapose, I suppose, we're going to dig into your story, but your backstory, but coming from the corporate world, how have you seen the things that you do now for retention and the focus and approach you have towards your workforce, I suppose, that you could have implemented or you could have learned, you could have done differently in the past?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to terribly embarrass my daughter because I always get this wrong. I see a meme. You
should have gone with the first one. No, that's good.
Anyway, that's okay. I don't mind embarrassing myself for you, Caleb.
Good.
And they say, why wouldn't you give the employee you've got the good pay rise, because it's going to cost you 5 times as much to recruit someone to replace them when they say you're not remunerating me for my worth.
Yeah.
And so I spent 10 years in accommodation, and a lot of small-owned, family-run accommodation-style businesses where there were limited funds available, and it was very heavily sales-driven. And before that, I worked in radio where it was all sales-driven. So you want to make that cash, you better hit that budget.
Yeah.
And I think the thing is that what not-for-profits allow you to do is provide value to your staff that is beyond money.
Yeah.
Because and I feel like I think that if you went out and asked any of my team today, they feel that they are fairly remunerated.
Yeah.
But that remuneration is far more than the money that gets hit in their bank account, and I'm the same.
Yeah.
But I think what I do now is, having been in business for ourselves, at the same time you went into business for yourself, I really realised that there are so many more things that are valuable to people than money. Absolutely. That, that's an important piece. We work so that we can live.
Yes.
But I think things like trust, ownership of your role, accountability for your role, being asked to collaborate on something that might have absolutely nothing to do with your role, but you might secretly be really passionate about.
That's cool.
Flexibility, I think, particularly myself, I'm currently a working mother, although, my daughter would say she doesn't need me so much anymore being in the later teens. Yeah. But offering that kind of flexibility and being outcomes focused. So it's not about clocking in at 9 and clocking out at 5 and eating your lunch at your desk. It's very much about, did we achieve the overall outcome within the deliverable time frame, allows people who have got younger and even older children to be with them when they need to. When people have got kids who are unwell, isn't that level of guilt that they can't come into the office. I think some of that shifted during COVID, but certainly I was already making that shift. And part of that is a very distinct decision around my leadership style. And, our board, like most not-for-profits, annually does a cultural and engagement survey of not just the staff but of the volunteers.
Yeah.
And, that is resoundingly positive, because I don't just talk the talk, I walk the walk.
Yeah.
And that's sometimes really easier said than done. I'm lucky in the role that I'm trusted to run the organisation efficiently and effectively, and that allows me to provide that same trust and respect to my team, and to have my focus be on developing them and their skills. I don't always get it right. That they'll attest to that as well. Sometimes I have a little bit of foot in mouth disease, more often than not, no. But what's really great is all of my team feel really comfortably challenging me.
Yeah, good.
Wow. And that's really helpful when, you get later in life and the memory starts to go and someone says, but hang on, 2 weeks ago you actually said this. So that's a really practical reason that's really helpful. But I get really excited about projects. So I get a little bit gung-ho and I'm riding the horse down the road, and then I look behind me and no one's there and I think, crap. And then I say, hey, we've got this great project. How should we do this? And I should have just gone to them in the first place, because they actually knew how to do it 10 times better than I was even thinking I was going to do it.
Wow, you're dropping like heaps of wisdom here, Lisa. So, one of the bits that I love that you've just dropped so casually is the flexible working environments and being outcomes focused is something that we're seeing a bit of a shift in the corporate world, but it's a bit of a shift, and there's a lot of places that I can see some organizations kind of trying to bring back what they had to do in necessity through COVID, and trying to bring back that sense of control when there shouldn't be that level of control. And it's a bit of a balance, right? Because it comes down to, you talked about leadership style and leadership structure. You want to have a culture that enables people to take ownership and responsibility for the outcome that they want to achieve, and you need to set them up to do that. So there's a bit of trust, but that comes with risk, right?
Absolutely. So I'm a bit bamboozled about this whole everyone's got to come back into the office. Like, we're all reading the Starbucks appoints a new CEO and everyone has to work from the office, including him, even though we're going to kill the environment so that he can travel to and from California, 5 days. I mean, I get that that's sensationalized, but I guess I've put a lot of thought into this because when I was in the corporate world, I don't know that I would have been comfortable to not have people in the office. But I very much was a micromanager, and there are people out there who used to work with me who were like, I tried to tell you you're a micromanager. I'm sure not everybody's a fan of Lisa. I get that. But looking back and after a lot of self-reflection, I know that I was very much a micromanager, and I made a very deliberate shift away from that. But you're right, it takes a lot of work. My team aren't able to have that trust and that autonomy, and some of them might say they still don't have as much as they would like. But that doesn't come automatically. For 4 years we've been building that, and it's every little thing that you do. It's not welcome to the organisation. How do you want to work? What are we going to do? Off you go. See you later. We trust you, and if you don't do it, we're going to slap you over the wrist because you didn't do any well and see you later. Yeah. It's all of those little things. A text, my child's unwell today. I'm really sorry. I don't think I can get into the office. Oh, no, I'm so sorry to hear that they're not well. I hope that they feel better. End of text.
Right. Yeah.
Not, when are you going to come back in? Have you done that? Have you met that deadline? I really need this thing from you. That does happen occasionally. That's a call. I'm really sorry to disturb you, but I need to know this today.
Yeah.
And again, that goes back to my very specific leadership style. And it's, to have a leadership style is probably a little bit egotistical. Yeah. Would be how I'd describe it. But I really would describe myself as a servant leader. Yeah. And people would say, your team is a servant to you? No, my team's not a servant to me. I'm a servant to my team. Yeah. My job as leader is to develop them and to build the skills in them so that they feel trusted. I can delegate what needs to be delegated, an area I'm still working on, and they have the autonomy and accountability to do what needs to be done. But that then means that they must be accountable for what they're going to do, and they are being held to account when something's not going the way it needs to be happen. That there's still those tough conversations that need to be had. But I've never yet had a conversation with my team where they didn't know it was already coming because of the culture we've built.
Right. And so what does that look like practically? So you say, they've given enough rope to, hang themselves with, but not actually get there. How do you actually bring boundaries in and then give someone a heads up when they're like, hey, you're getting close?
Yeah. So, I guess it's about having that continual communication. So I have, depending on the team's role and how much they work, I have regular meetings with them. For some people, that's once a month. For other people, it's once a week, just depending on how closely we work together.
Yeah, cool.
But it's very clear. Here's our strategic actions. Here's our business plan.
Great.
Here's how your role fits into it.
Yeah, awesome.
I need you to do this so that I can do this so that we can do that.
Yeah, good. So I hear that's really making people aware of how they fit into the overall working and achieving the mission that you are on this planet to achieve as an organisation, and they know what their little part to play is.
So if you don't achieve what you need to achieve, it's not just that you have let yourself down, you've actually let all of this other stuff down. And because we're having those conversations regularly, where's this at? Because last month you said it was going to be here and now it's still not there. Are we going to hit the final deadline? Because everybody works differently. And that's been a real challenge for me as a leader to recognise that not everybody works on, can you believe it, a little paper checklist where even if I did something that wasn't on the checklist, I'll write it down. I'll give it a big little tick there. And that's been a real challenge for me. And I've got people with different styles of working, preferred ways. I've got someone who works from home full time. I've got a couple of hybrid people. I've got a couple of people who, to me, it looks like they're operating within chaos. But to them, it is, and it all comes out Outcome in the end,
Wow.
absolutely achieved. Just absolutely nothing about how I would have gone to do it.
Yeah.
And as a leader, that's been my biggest challenge is Elsering it, letting go,
Yes.
to see how it all pans out and to be there and support them. And I think the other thing is that when it goes to crap, when it's we're going to hell in a handbasket, supporting them and saying, but we tried it.
Yeah.
And we did the best that we could, and we were on the same page with this is how we were going to tackle it. But I think let's now talk about how we would do this in future.
Great.
And I think when people know that even when things aren't going right, that you're going to have their back and you're going to stand up for them, that builds on that trust.
Yeah.
And it happens in the reverse.
Yeah. It's so critical to achieving anything of value, isn't it? If people don't feel like people feel like it's too risky, it's too much of a risk to bring initiative to do something, that is a bit risky, or they inject, if it's too much to inject too much energy into it, and they're not safe to fail. Then they won't take the necessary steps to do something really great, like to innovate, to do things the way that they would do them, not rely on a system or a process that is just a bit formulaic, right?
And something I've learned about myself is because I speak so confidently, even maybe when I am not the expert, people assume I'm the expert. So I've had to learn to be like, I'm talking about this and this is so correct, but it's not necessarily. So I've had to get more curious, which is absolutely my biggest challenge.
Yeah.
And a really good example of that is, we opened our social enterprise, our thrift store, which is helping us generate revenue for our 2 call centers, which is amazing.
It's great.
And I've got an amazing team out there and our store manager's fabulous. But we hit some really big barriers. We got delayed due to permitting and building issues when we first leased our building.
Yeah, wow.
And our store manager hung in there and dealt with so many, tough blows, until we got open. And, I remember having a conversation with her about something. Now, I don't know anything about retail. I'm a little bit hospitality, but I don't know anything about retail. And she is absolutely unbelievable. She knows her stuff, right?
Yeah.
But I go in, I'm like, right. And I was thinking we should do, and I can't remember what it was, but, and she was like, yep. And we were building our relationship still. Yep. And I got home that night and I was doing emails, and I had an email. I've been thinking about what you said earlier and I completely disagree. And this is why I disagree. I actually think we should do this. And I went back and said, absolutely, it's your store. I don't know why I got involved. I agree 100%. Thank you.
That's so good.
But I actually really like that. I think that
says a lot about the atmosphere that you present in
I think when people can come and say, Lisa, you got that wrong.
Yeah.
Or not always I got it wrong, but I've got a differing viewpoint.
Different idea.
Can we discuss how we might meet each other in the middle, or what's more valid, or anything like that? So, it's hard conversation to have, because I hear a lot of, Lisa, you didn't get that right. But I try and remind myself my job's here to serve those people. So if they feel comfortable enough to come to me and bring anything that is of a concern to them, I think I'm doing my job.
I love that. All right, you've talked a bunch about some really good learnings that you've had and how you've progressed. Before we dive into that, because I think that's going to be the most fun part of the conversation, I want to just lay a simple component of the organization is, how do you bring in money? How do you bring in revenue? Like I always say this, and it's a real bugbear of mine that the designation and the term for that type of organization is not for profit. I think that's so dumb, because you're like, the more profit you make, the more money you make as an organization, the more impact you're going to have.
That's right. The more services we can offer.
You want to be able to make more money, right?
Yep.
It does shift. There's a very different perspective and a different focus, but you want to make money, right?
Yeah.
You do really
It's kind of like a double entendre, right? So a lot of people talk about, there's been a big shift in industry. So talking about being a charity or a for-purpose organisation. So we're for purpose. We're not for making, it's not, we don't want money. We want money so that we can have purpose.
Yes, good.
So that's
great.
That's a thing for sure. And I think that's been a big shift. But how do we get money? When I can, I tap dance in the street with a hat in my hand. It feels like that. No, that's not true. I think when I first started 4 years ago, we receive some money from the Victorian state government, for which we're very grateful. However, we would love more. Always asking for more. So we're doing a lot of advocacy at state level, and we have got some really great supporters locally, particularly our members locally are really supportive. So that's great because that gives us the foundation to build our fundraising on. But 75% of all the money we need to operate Lifeline Loddon Mallee, we have to raise ourselves.
Yeah, wow.
Every year.
That's a big chunk.
That's a big chunk. So things like our social enterprise, our thrift store, has really been game-changing for us because, one, it's a revenue source that we can control ourselves. We're able to offer employment opportunities to people who might not otherwise have been able to get employment. It's another connection with us to the community and for the community to connect with Lifeline and the services that we offer. But I believe that we're a genuine old school, I know you're going to use that word a lot, op shop. We're not an op shop that's selling all of our stuff as vintage because not all of our stuff is vintage. We're not an op shop who's trying, our sole purpose is just to make money.
Yeah.
If you want to go in and get a Stussy T-shirt that's been donated, that's $3 or $4, not $10 or $12.
Nice.
So we are trying to address the cost of living crisis. My store manager says we only have the best at our thrift store, and she's absolutely right. But we're not about inflating the prices. We want our op shop to address a need that's in the community.
Great.
So that's really exciting.
But also it does still have to make some good money for you, right? Because that's
absolutely.
And I love that you're not compromising the either opportunity with an opportunity shop, that you realize that yes, that is a fundraising tool and it is a revenue stream, but the existence of that in itself is another arm of service to the community.
That's right.
Which is an interesting kind of thing.
I get a call weekly from our store manager saying, I've got someone here who's looking for some help. Where do I direct them depending on their situation?
Wow, yeah.
I've got, I just want you to know that I gifted, a $25 voucher to someone who came in and they were, needed some things and they didn't, So it's not, it's a genuine, we're trying to provide opportunity for people.
And are you running that? Could you say it's a real win-win for you and the organisation and the community at the moment? Like, is it bringing in some good revenue? I haven't had an op shop.
I don't know how to say this diplomatically, but I am highly surprised at the level of revenue that a well set out displayed store can bring in, and it's making a difference. And we're going to be able to deliver a lot more services as a result of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great.
So that's one thing that we're doing. We deliver a lot of training into community. So sometimes that's through organisations providing us a grant to deliver training to the community for free.
Gotcha.
Other times it's organisations, local businesses and companies wanting their staff to, particularly mental health first aid, domestic family violence. They want their people managers and their staff to have those skills. So that's fee for service. So that helps generate a little bit of money.
Yep.
And a lot of fundraising. So this month it's September. And we're running our big Hello for Hope, which is like kind of where lots of people do lots of small things to raise a little bit of money each, but bring it all together and it turns out to be a nice contribution.
Love that.
So, for example, where we are today, I know the Emporium had a morning tea.
Yes, I emptied my drawer of the poo change, and it took me so long.
I'm not sure that I want to know what poo change is.
It's the stuff that you don't want.
Oh,
it's like all the silver coin.
I was like, I would say we would take our money however it comes, but I don't know that I want your poo coins.
You've never heard that expression before?
Clearly, I'm a millennial, and you are a generation well underneath me. So the Emporium's done a morning tea, might raise $100. Amazing.
Yeah.
Today, some local cafes are collecting donations for us. One of them texted me just before I got here, $750.
Oh, that's amazing.
Amazing.
Wowee.
Local businesses are running raffles with their social clubs. We had the comedy festival run a comedy night up at Piano Bar.
Cool.
Yeah. Bendigo Bank ran a bingo night. We had like a Star Cinema screening. So lots of fun things the community can get involved in.
Wow. Right. So let me just lay out a few of the peripheral details of this. So you're saying Hello for Hope Week, it's like a surge. It's a particular week in every year?
It's a month. So
a month.
September.
Righto.
World Suicide Prevention Day is on the 10th. So it's a month.
Yeah.
And basically people say, I'll do something big, I'll also do something small, I'll do something massive, and all of that money comes together, and it might only be, might be $200, $700, $2,000, $5,000, and it all comes together at the end of the month. We aim to try and raise about $40,000.
Great.
And that all then goes towards helping us recruit and train more volunteers, because that's the biggest expense.
Yeah. Gotcha. And so lessons for social enterprises and for purpose organizations, has that always been the model for and how have you seen the benefit of bringing a focus into a shorter period of time to bring more donations in?
Yeah, so I think depending on your organisation, depends on your model. As I said, when I first got here, we weren't doing any external fundraising, doing very little external training. We didn't have any social enterprise. So for me, I kind of took my business experience and then my not-for-profit experience serving on many boards and said, well, we need a diverse range of revenue streams. We don't want to just be relying on one thing. We need to have multiple things going.
Yeah. And
so over that time, we started to build. So we started with the training. We already had the trainers that we could deliver training.
Great.
And the community was screaming out for that kind of training. So you start, I guess, always with the low-hanging fruit, and you start to build on that. Now 4 years in, we've got a part-time fundraising and events officer who basically runs all of these events. And Hello for Hope has shifted. So this is our third year. And it's morphed quite a bit from the first year to the third year about how we do it. So we normally have a really nice, informative, sharing our impact event with local business and community members where they get to come along to a really lovely lunch and hear a bit about what we do.
Cool.
And that starts the engagement process. And then from there we start to engage them and say, what are you thinking about hosting? What can we do to help you host something that might generate some more revenue?
Yeah.
And what's really great is people who have been involved this year for the third year are kind of just running with it themselves.
Cool.
So, all they want to do is, how do I get a logo? Can I get a speaker at my event? Here's the money. That's absolute amazing. We're a really small team. I am one. When I started, there was me and one other staff member. There's now maybe 8 of us, and pretty much everyone other than me and one other work part-time.
Wow.
So we've got a huge amount of work to do. So anyone who wants to run an event and run it, pretty much on their own is amazing.
Right.
But also we love to support people to run events. I mean, I've had some fun this month. I didn't quite win the bingo. Every time I go to these things, someone else wins something. I went with my girlfriend. Not only did she win the 2,963 jelly beans in the jar. Yeah.
It was like a guess how
many. It was
many.
a guess how many lollies. She was 7 off.
What?
Unbelievable. And then she won like some cinema ticket. I'm like, every time. And then I went to something else and they won like the cash prize. And I'm like, my friends want to come and support Lifeline because they always win something.
That's great.
Have a lot of fun, and people love to do something that feels like it's supporting an organisation that does really good work as well.
Yeah. And especially locally. It's really cool. Okay, that's revenue. So let's dive into backstory. I mean, I feel like we've had so much of a wealth of a conversation so far, but I'm really excited to, I know a lot of the backstory, but I'm keen to.
I wonder if you do.
Oh, all right.
When I was 5.
Oh my golly. How long have we got? I'm keen to hear, as I said before, you mentioned, you used to be a bit of a micromanager. You must have along the journey picked up skills and self-awareness and been built as a leader, and there's been a lot of things that have kind of been tools in that you've gathered to build you to who you are now and the capability you've got. Lay it out for me, Lisa.
Look, I will go back a little way, maybe not to when I was 5, because I think there's a particular thing that happened to me when I was in late high school that I think showed me how to be determined and perseverance and how it would pay off. So I've always been a loud and outspoken person, and I always used to speak before I thought. And I've done a lot of learning over the time with that. But when I was in year 12, I was president of the SRC, president of the year 12 yearbook. I was in the production. I was running the athletics, food carnival van thing. I was doing all of the things and thought I was doing a lot of work at school. Bum. So back when I went to year 12, we used to get a thing called a TER, which I think is the same as the ATAR now. Yeah. But when I was in high school, way back in 1997, you used to have to call the hotline and put in a whole bunch of digits to get through to find out your result. And I was dead set that I wanted to go and do I knew I wanted to do hospitality by then. And I knew there was a couple of universities I wanted to go to. I knew I needed like 65. So not a huge TER, And I'd worked really hard, now on reflection, worked really hard on all of the other stuff, maybe not so much at school. And, I put in my 5-digit student number and then my 20-digit VTAC number or, PIN, whatever. And I finally get through, and
what was the number?
Below 30.
Oh,
so I didn't even get an actual number, just below 30. And I hung up and I was like, that was the moment where I was like, oh, crap. You've stuffed this up.
Oh, no.
Big time.
Oh, that's
so
a
anyway, so be it. And I luckily had an uncle who was in the education system, and he said, you need to write a letter to the head of the hospitality school at Latrobe. I wanted to go to Latrobe Hospitality School in Albury-Wodonga, and you need to write a letter and explain to them all of the things you're doing. Like I was working in hospital, I was working 2 jobs in hospitality at the time. I was really passionate. Like I had my RSA, I had my food handlers, all those kinds of things. And I was really good at it. Not as good as my husband. Yes, you are much far superior to me, my darling. But it was, and I was really passionate about it. And it was just like an academic thing. And he said it's not even an academic. I mean, it will be an academic course. It was a Bachelor of Business in Hospitality. So I decided that, okay, I would do that. And back in 1997, you used to I'd have to go into the library at the local library, and I'd have to use the computer, and it would print out going, ching.
Wow.
So I had this DOS email letter thing that I'd printed off, and I made I don't know, maybe 6 copies of it. In the meantime, I enrolled in the local TAFE to do Diploma of Hospitality or something like that. Anyway, I sent this letter off every Monday for 6 weeks.
Oh, no way.
Same letter.
Yes.
Every Monday.
Come on.
I was due to start the TAFE on the Monday, and on the Friday I got a letter in the mail saying, you are in, stop sending me letters.
Perfect.
That's how I remember it. I'm sure it was far more professional than that, because Latrobe's an excellent institute, but 3rd round offer, someone obviously had pulled out.
Great.
And they were like, okay.
This person is so squeaky.
Biggest regret of Latrobe's
the
life.
dripping
No,
tap.
not true. So that taught me a really big lesson about, it's not just about what you can do academically. It is what you can do, what your determination and your perseverance would show. And, I went on to do really well in that course, and since then I've also done my master's with Latrobe. I do love Latrobe. A great thing that ever happened to me. But I think that started me realising that things aren't always going to turn out how you want, and sometimes you've got to be self-determined to do that. I would say, and I think that there's not a person in the world, my mother, my husband, my work colleagues, that wouldn't say my biggest asset is my ability to self-reflect. I'm not always super aware self-aware as I would like to be in the moment, although I have put a lot of work into that. but my self-reflection after the fact and my willingness to put my hand up and say, I was thinking about that thing we talked about the other day, and I actually feel like I didn't actually represent myself as best I would like.
Yeah.
Or as authentically as I now feel. And I wonder if we could revisit that conversation.
Cool. Not easy to do.
Not easy to do. And many times I have gone down a deep journaling rabbit hole to get to where I want to be.
Yeah.
And that piece when I was in year 12 and went on to university and you know, had all the challenges everybody has at university. I didn't eat for a week, but gee, I was out drinking at Eddie's on a Wednesday night. You know, all of those things teach us that determination and that perseverance. And I think that then those two things, learning that hard lesson then, and that I could control it, I could self-determine what was going to happen if I didn't give up. And my really strong self-reflection has kind of gotten me to where I am now. Part of that self-determination helped me through really difficult personal times, like when my daughter was born and I was only 25 weeks pregnant. That was a really challenging and traumatic period.
Yeah.
You know, when I've been unwell in the past, when relationships have been tough, that kind of self-determination to be like, I'm not just going to let this slide. I need to continue on, and I want to get a certain outcome, and I'm going to do what I need to do, even if that means choking it down and putting that olive branch out to get to that right outcome.
Yeah.
For what I want. So
great.
I spent many years with Quest Apartments in in Melbourne, in Shepparton and in Bendigo. And when the properties got sold to a new franchisee, which happens often, my role was no longer required and I got made redundant. Another really particularly defining for a career. My husband and I had opened our own cafe that he was operating only 6 months earlier.
Yeah.
I worked that out the other day, like only 6 months, and then I got made redundant.
Well, yeah. I mean, fun fact for everybody, because no one would know. We moved in to the neighbouring, like we shared a wall, I think, with the cafe in that was when was
May
that?
2015.
May 2015. So we moved into the property at exactly the same week.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I remember Nino said to me, he came home and he said, oh, there's like a film guys are moving in next door. He goes, but they're babies. And one of them's getting married. And I'm like, what do you mean babies? And he's like, I said, not actual baby filming company. And he's like, no. And then I met you and I went, he was a baby.
That's great. Yeah, but that was a journey, hey?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I got made redundant and, you know, of course, all of those things that go through your mind, like maybe if I was better or, you know, in the end, it was, you know, the right decision for them and it was probably a good thing for me. But that started me on a real long piece of self-reflection around where I wanted to go in that next phase of my career. Yeah. So when that happened, I was maybe mid-30s. So I'd been working for a reasonable period of time, you know. I mean, I'd been working since I was 15, but actually working post-uni probably for 15 years. And so, you know, that was kind of like phase one. And I really love working at Quest Apartments and I really enjoyed the hospitality side of things. And by the time I left, I was running, you know, sort of overseeing the management of the two properties here in Bendigo. And I had, you know, great franchisees and I know the franchisees that are current are doing a fabulous job too. And I sort of chopped and changed around a few different roles in the years in between and learnt lots of lessons and met lots of great people. But while I was doing that, I really kind of worked out what is it that I want. You know, you go from high school to uni, you go from uni to a job, you go from job to job, you get married, you have a baby, more jobs, moving to Bendigo, all that kind of stuff. And I started thinking about who am I? So, you know, I started thinking about what are my personal values. And how do they differ to what my professional values are? And they absolutely do differ, often very similar but different. And so I started to do a lot of work around that and I started listening to, he doesn't know it, but Simon, if you're ever listening. You're my secret boyfriend.
Simon Sinek.
Oh, who doesn't love Simon? Not only is he like a beautiful human and very insightful, you're also nice to look at.
Great. Yeah, I'm sure Simon Sinek is every.
That's right. We'll chat to Simon.
Yeah.
But I watched his Start With Your Why TED Talk.
Yeah.
And started, watching a few different TED Talks, started talking to some other people in leadership roles about what they were doing and what their journey was. And so I kind of started to formulate what was next for me. At the time I was sitting on a couple of not-for-profit, but community-run organisation boards. Like I was on Food Fossicers, I was on Women's Health Loddon Mallee for a time. And what I realised was those were the things that were still in my cup. Not the work in the commercial space, but the things that made a difference in our community. And so I started thinking about, well, I don't have experience. I've got commercial experience and some of those skills transferable. But I could see already that the chasm for me was going to be moving from somewhere that was predominantly focused on making money to we're interested in making impact. And we need to make money and deliver stuff to do that, but it's about impact.
Yeah.
And how would I make that shift? And I decided one of the things I wanted to do was upskill. And so I applied to do the MBA at La Trobe here in Bendigo. And that was one of the best decisions I ever made.
Cool.
I met lots of great people locally, but also from across Victoria and Melbourne, because the way it was structured when I first started was it was all, you might do some intensives in Melbourne for a whole weekend. You might do weekly classes here in Bendigo for another subject. You might do something online. So I really built my network out, which was awesome.
That's cool.
And I got the skills that I didn't have. So I might understand financial analysis, but how do I take that to the next level with business modelling?
Great.
So that was one thing that I did. And then the other thing that I did is I started to decide there were specific organisations I wanted to align myself with that aligned with my values.
Yeah.
And I was really lucky to end up at Loddon Mallee with Leah Satori, who was the exec officer at the time.
Yeah.
And that was life-changing.
Yeah.
That experience. I was very lucky because Leah trusted me and gave me the autonomy to be accountable for my role. And I was able to slowly, I'm sure Leah would say very slowly in some understand the difference between commercial and community.
Yeah.
And a really good example of that was I would rush into the office at 9:05 every day because I had a young child at the time that I had to get to school.
Yeah.
You've got to take him to school and the doors don't open about 8:30 and you've got to read him the book and then you've got to get all the way from one end of town into town.
Yeah.
And I'd come rushing in with my lunch bag and my bag and, I'm sorry. And every day for a year, she basically came in and said, why are you apologising? I do not care that you are here 5 minutes late. I could not care if you were half an hour late. What I care about is, can you achieve your job?
Yeah.
Can you do what I need you to do in the timeline I can? And that poor woman must have said that to me. But eventually I learnt.
Yeah.
I stopped apologising and I stopped getting there at 9:05. I started getting there at 9:15 because I'd stop and get a coffee because I knew that I could do that 15 minutes of work.
Yeah.
Make it up or get the work done in half the time through efficiency.
Right.
So that's just one small. There were so many things she taught me in the community space, but that's just one little example.
Shout out to Leah.
Thank you, Leah.
Legend.
And so combined with my studies and getting the opportunity to observe a board setting from the other side of the coin and building all of those skills, then the opportunity came up to be at Lifeline. And by then I'd sort of started to really shift to this Serbian style leadership. Like I really want to be about, I know that if I can uplift my people and build that trust that Leah had built in me, and hold people to account and trust that they would go and do, that's where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And lots of people say things like, when you go in an interview, people are like, what are your superpower? I'd say my superpower is I can generally achieve twice as much as any normal person within the same time frame. Not in all things. Like I'm graded as a jack of all trades, a little bit of HR, a little bit of finance, a little bit of grant writing. But my biggest challenge has been to shift from being able to do lots of things all of the time that are really tangible.
Yeah.
Here's this report. Here's this piece of communication. Here's the outcome from this meeting, to stopping and taking the time to think big and focus on strategic stuff. And it's still a challenge.
Yeah.
But I actually have time built in now.
Great.
That I'm like, that's for me to solve those wicked problems that we have.
Yeah.
And that might be, well, I'm going for a walk, or, you know, I have these amazing epiphanies in the shower. I'm not something to do with water.
No, there is. Doesn't it? It's a full thing.
Oh, thank goodness, because I just thought it's like every time.
No. Everybody says that, but people started putting the dots together and getting some good research behind it. But it's actually a thing with water, yeah.
There you go. There you go. Simon, you should do a TED Talk. And I guess, you know, starting to get more curious and more self-reflection and more aware in the moment, or, you know, all of those things feed into this. But, you know, I kind of, you know, I think when people say, how do you do that? I mean, I touched on it already, but it's a positive and inclusive culture right throughout all levels of the organisation. So, for example, I'm about to go on a week's leave and I've got a couple of key team members who might normally be the key contact if I'm away should, you know, something happen.
Yeah.
They're both also either away or delivering something that can't be.
Okay.
So we've got one of our other team members as the key contact. I have no concerns with them being the key contact. I've given them the information they need and I trust that they'll make the best decision with the information that they've got.
Cool.
They said to me, what happens if someone calls in sick and we need to cover them? It's an example.
Yep.
I said, well, the first thing I want you to make sure that you do is you care about the person before you worry about how we're going to cover the shit. I want to make sure that person knows the only thing we care about is that they're going to get well soon.
Yep.
And that we look forward to seeing them as soon as they can be back.
Yeah.
Should I ask them when they be back? No. So it is that little stuff because people who come to work are not robots, as you said. People come to work they work to live, not live to work.
Yeah.
And so it's everything else that happens outside of those 8 hours a day that matters. But the most time they spend with anyone in any given day is their team at work.
Yeah.
I think it's something like 65% of your waking hours are spent at work.
Whoa.
So if 65% of my waking hours are at work and all they ever care about is how they're going to cover my shift, that's, you know.
Yeah.
So it's that little stuff. So that's the little stuff that makes it inclusive and positive. Because when something happens with someone, oh, I had a really hard call and I feel like I need more skills in this area. That's great. Thanks very much to Ruby, who said she needed this skill. We're now delivering a whole professional development piece based on that.
How good does that make Ruby feel?
Yeah.
Wow.
You know, so it's those. It's not the big things. The big things, the trust, the autonomy, the accountability, that comes because of the little building blocks.
Wow. That's really, really powerful stuff. Like it's, I love that is your approach and that is how you roll, because giving some practical language about how you build those things in an organization, it's those type of elements that can elevate an entire organization's culture. And it's not, sometimes it's not until we hear someone else's experience of building that type of culture that we're like, righto, maybe I could shift a little bit of the way I interact with a staff member when they're saying, hey, I'm off sick or whatever, and not just go to, well, now you've given me a problem. So thanks very much for that. But to realize that, you know, a successful organization, any organization, is made up of a whole heap of people.
That's right.
And it's how do you actually drive the ship in a way that achieves the mission and everybody's still alive on that ship?
That's right.
And happy.
Yeah, that's right. And look, it's not always like that. I'm sure my team will say, we're not happy 100% of the time, but I think that's unrealistic as well.
Yeah.
But I think giving people a platform where they feel that they're trusted, they know that they're valued, they know that their work is valued. That's what builds those kinds of things.
I feel like I've been speaking to you for like 10 minutes, but it's been, you're like, wait, it hasn't been 10 minutes? It's like over an hour. But this conversation has been like jam-packed full of gold, from like the inside workings of Lifeline Loddon Mallee and the impact you're having, but to the lessons that have driven you to be the leader that you are. And I really respect you as a leader, seeing from an outside friend perspective of how well you do. But I've just, it's been even deeper now, having some really specific examples. So thank you so much. As we round this conversation out, I want to ask you key takeaways, like your lessons you've learned and things that you've been like, that was core. Like we've probably discussed a bunch of them that you think that was really essential learning, or a really important part of my story that's helped me be who I am today. I want you to share any advice that maybe you haven't touched on yet, or something that you want to highlight as a really important piece that you think you should pass on to another leader.
Our lived experience, whether personal or professional, all builds into that. I think about, I've had some deeply challenging professional experiences and some deeply traumatic personal experiences. And from those, resilience has been born. And I think I've always tried to look at opportunities when you think that things are pretty tough and they can't get any worse. How can I help myself to get out of these? And that indirectly builds resilience in you. So I think any opportunity where you have failure is an opportunity to get stronger.
Yeah.
And I think that, the story about getting into uni is one of those, and things like that. I think being honest with yourself about what you are and are capable of, and what you do and don't get right, and admitting when you don't get it right.
Yeah.
That's definitely, it's a really hard thing. Sometimes I think, I really don't want to have to say that was wrong. I was wrong.
Yeah.
But sometimes you get the better outcomes from it.
Yeah.
I think that, I talk now about a team who's got full trust and autonomy and accountability, but that takes time. We've only just gotten there in the last 6 to 8 months.
Wow.
We implemented probably the final piece about 9 months ago, and so we're sort of starting to see the fruits out later.
Yeah.
So things take time.
Yeah.
And I think for long-term success, it takes time to build that.
Yeah.
And some people are really lucky and they can do that more quickly. But I think sustainability is like a really important thing. So it's not just the one thing, it's the multiple things that then become a bigger thing.
Yeah, it's not how fast you can get somewhere, but how long you can run that race for.
Yeah, and I think thinking strategically, but also starting with something small. So I talked about picking the low-hanging fruit. What's something that we've already got that is adding value to the community and would help us generate revenue? Let's start with that. How can we build on that? What's the next building block from there? And leveraging the wisdom that's available to you. I've got a board of directors at Lifeline that are amazing. Before that, as I mentioned, Leah, and there was an amazing board at Lifeline Loddon Mallee as well. Brains, trusts of other CEOs. I think leveraging wisdom that's available to you, because you don't have all the answers. So be curious.
Yeah.
I wish I was far more curious than I am. But that's an area for me to work on.
Love that. Lisa, thank you for your vulnerability, your wisdom, and for sharing that with us. It's been an absolute honor and a privilege to have you here with me.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that's it for this episode. If you really enjoyed listening, why don't you drop a comment in the comments below? Make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel so that you get updates on when all of the next ones come out. That really helps grow this little community of people that are diving into regional business and celebrating and learning more from it. So really appreciate your support, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.